Hey guys, I've had a few people asking about my build for this season and asking for me to showcase what I got going on. Basically, I originally followed the max roll guide, but they were kind of focused more on certain play styles, like charge specific builds, which are good for nightmare dungeons, but not very good for boss farming. Or they'd have an alternative where it's just focus on Hota, and it's good for boss killing, but not very good for nightmare dungeons. So I kind of went a little different directions, kind of met a best of both worlds. And yeah, let's get into it here. So I went charge Hota. Basically, we're focusing on overpower damage. That's the main thing we're looking for. Charge and Hota are the main things we're using here. I use a kick to basically dump all my fury, and I'll go over that in a minute. And then just 3 shouts to help on cooldown and help on fury generation and extra damage. So my build is no uber uniques in this build, so it's definitely viable. My gear is pretty decent because I've farmed a lot in the vaults, so my stats are pretty decent, but definitely not. It could be way better, that's for sure. Especially if I had a Shaco or like a grandfather, this build would just be insane. But I don't have a whole lot of time, so I can't farm Duriel forever. So we'll start with the first one here, the helmet Godslayer crown. We basically use this for the stun. So every time you stun or you damage a boss, it'll pull nearby enemies, which doesn't really matter. But the big key thing here is you deal 57 increased damage to them for 3 seconds. So basically we have a stun with our charge. So we're going to be stunning enemies like crazy, and we're doing 57 increased damage, or you can get up to 60 increased damage. And then every time we attack a boss, we're also just doing more damage. So this is definitely a must for this build. This also gives cooldown reduction and extra damage and life, which is great. For the chest, I just went with the juggernauts to give us extra armor. And I focused on brawling skills, which the brawling skills is the charge here. So it's extra damage to brawling. I got a little bit of resistance there and some life and extra damage. And I want to go over real quick. I don't even have max resistances, so this just tells you my gear is not optimized. I could definitely get better rolls on resistances and stuff. So we'll go to the gloves. I went Hammer of the Ancients on the gloves, so this just adds an extra damage percent, and I think it makes it more of an AOE. You could put this on a weapon down here, which I've done in the past, and it'll give you, well, if you put it on a two-hander, it'll give you 30 damage. So if you want to focus more on Hammer of the Ancients damage, you can swap this to this, but I like this here on the gloves personally. And I have +4 to Hammer of the Ancients, which, I mean, that's huge. Definitely go for that. Overpower damage, that's all you need is overpower damage. Strength, all stats. Tybalt's Will for the pants, you gotta have Tybalt's Will. So basically, every time you're unstoppable, you deal increased damage, and you're also gaining primary resource, which is another thing this build kind of focuses on. You're basically dumping resource and gaining a bunch of resource, and it adds damage to that. So definitely, Tybalt's Will gives you more resource. Damage reduction, more damage, and potion capacity. Ghostwalker, these are just pretty standard. I went with evade charges, that's the best in my opinion. Movement speed, you gotta go with movement speed. And then I went berserking duration, and some resistances. These resistances could be helpful if I max them out, it'd be a lot better. There is one thing, an option down here, which I have not played around with, but it could be a better option than the Ghostwalker, is this vampiric power from last season. Basically turns you into bats. So every time you evade, you become unstoppable for 2.5 seconds. And with, what is it here? Yeah, so with these, I get 3 maximum evade charges, so I'll get 4 evade charges, so 4 chances to gain unstoppable, and then if you remember the Tybalt's Will, it increases damage while unstoppable and resource gain. So I could be just hitting unstoppable like a bunch of times. The only downside is this is that the cooldown is increased by 7 seconds, which is pretty trash. So I don't know. I haven't played around with it, but that could be interesting to use. That could increase damage. But another thing too is with the Juggernauts, your cooldown is also increased. So that on top of that could be potentially bad. I don't know. So after that, I have the Limitless Rage. So each point of fury you generate while at max fury grants your next core skill increased damage. And this is our core skills, Hammer the Ancients, so we want to bump up that damage as much as possible. I have overpower damage, I have core skill damage, and strength in all stats. And with the two-handed maces, you get an added overpower damage. Next one, I go with maces. Just because our expertise synergizes with that, I believe. So this is more damage while berserking, overpower damage, all stats. And this is basically every time you swap weapons 8 times, you are going to gain overpower and increase the damage of overpower. And with this charge, we're using our axe, and with Hota, we're using our mace. So we're going to be swapping weapons every time we switch between the two skills. The next one is Charge. Ancestral Charge. So this one's just a must. It makes a ton of dudes charge when you hit it. That's kind of a must. I put it in here because it does extra damage. You could put it in a different option that's not on a weapon, but I like it here just because when I'm doing Nightmare Dungeons, it does extra damage to multiple enemies, which is good. So again, strength, all stats, damage while berserking, crit damage, overpower damage could be good here. This is a mace, so it does give us overpower damage again. And then for our axe, we went Edge Masters. So skills deal up to 40 increased damage based upon your available primary resource when cast. Receiving the maximum benefit while you're at full primary resource. So basically we're just wanting to generate resource like crazy, so this we can get this additive damage to our skills. And this also has overpower damage. It has damage while berserking, strength, all stats. And these are kind of the key items here for this build. So I'll start with this one, the Banished Lord's Talisman. So basically, after you spend 300 of your primary resource, your next core skill, which is going to be our Hota, is going to guarantee overpower, and your overpower or your critical strikes that overpower deal increased damage. So we want to dump 300 primary resources as fast as we can, and then overpower on our next swing. And this is going to synergize with this ring. So after spending 100 fury within 3 seconds, your next cast of Hammer the Ancients within 5 seconds is guaranteed to critical strike and deals 28% bonus critical strike damage. So we're gonna dump our resource, and if we do 300 resource, this is also gonna count that. So if we dump 300, we're also dumping for this one. So we're going to basically load up overpower, and then once we're ready, we smash and deal critical strike. And it's just insane damage. So these are two huge things. It also gives, the Banished Lord gives extra overpower damage, resource generation. I mean, this amulet's pretty good. Plus 2 ranks to core skills, which Hammer the Ancients is a core skill. Then Ring of Red Furor, that gives us attack speed. It gives us more fury and more resource generation, which is huge. And then the last thing we have here is Unrelenting Fury. So killing an enemy or hitting a boss with a core skill refunds its base fury costs. So we want to spend as little, or we want to generate as much as possible, basically. So that's the gear there. We'll go into my expertise. So I went with two-handed axe. It's going to increase damage to vulnerable. And then it also just increases critical strike chance to vulnerable. And then we'll go with a skill tree here. You can put whatever in the first one here. We basically just want to get Hammer of the Ancients. That's going to max out, and you want to go down to Furious Hammer of the Ancients. So that's going to give you extra damage for each point of Fury. And then we want Rallying Cry, which is going to give us Unstoppable and increase resource regeneration and movement speed. Then I went for some max life here. Here it went with movement speed and shout effect duration. For this one, we want Kick, because Kick is basically going to make enemies vulnerable, but the most important thing is that it's going to consume all of your fury, and that's how we're going to trigger the Banished Lord's Talisman. We're going to dump all of our fury with Kick, and then regenerate it with a shout, and then that's going to activate our critical strike and overpower, and then we just do a massive bonk damage. War Cry, this is just going to give us berserking. Charge, we want cooldown reduction on charge. So if we hit multiple enemies, it can reduce the cooldown by 9 seconds. The cooldown is 12.5 seconds, so that almost just completely resets it. Down here I got damage reduction while berserking, 3 points into brawling skill damage, and fury generation. Pit Fighter, increased damage and damage reduction, and thick skin to unlock counter offensive, which is going to do fortify, and this could possibly be changed out for something else. Wallop, just going to increase damage. Overpower, increased damage with two-handers. Wrath of the Berserker. So this is an ultimate. It's going to give us berserking and unstoppable. Increases fury generation as well, and adds a ton of damage. Then max fury. This could be potentially put somewhere else too. And then last one, unbridled rage. So we want core skills to do even increased damage, and it costs more fury. So this can also help us to trigger the Banished Lord's Talisman or the Ring of Red Furor here. So those are the abilities. We'll go with the Paragon. So first one I went with Ire. It's going to give us increased damage while berserking. Then we went with the Bone Breaker board, and that's going to grant us overpower every 12 seconds. And down here, this icon is going to show you that overpower is ready to go. And this is the cooldown timer here. So this is definitely a must, because we want to have overpower as much as possible. And went with Marshall here. This one's a key one. After casting Shout skill, the active cooldown for other non-shout skills is reduced by 4 seconds. So basically, you're wanting to charge, and then that charge is going to reduce to like 3 or 4 seconds. And then once we hit a shout, then it's going to completely reset charge so you can hit it again. Then we go over here to, this is the Warbringer board, and I go in with Exploit. So this is going to increase damage to vulnerable, and this is also going to be a key thing here, is that every time we damage an enemy, they become vulnerable. So this is also going to synergize with all of our other vulnerable aspects. Then we're going with the Carnage board, and I went with Mortal Draw. So every time we swap, we are going to do extra weapon damage, and swapping weapons has 18% chance to cause the skill's damage to critical strike. So every time we're charging and then we're Hota, we're swapping weapons, so every time we just instantly gain extra damage. and just extra damage while berserking is great. This one here, Decimator. So each time you make an enemy vulnerable, your damage increases by 10. Overpowering and vulnerable enemy grants additional 10% bonus for 5 seconds. So making them vulnerable is going to be just huge for this build. It also synergizes with the vulnerable glyph that we have at the bottom. And this just gives us, if we use maces, it's going to increase our overpower damage, which we use maces mainly. And I think this is the last board here, which is the Blood Rage board. And I went with Dominate here. So it's just increased overpower damage. And this is kind of also kind of an added plan B that we are just maintaining overpower every 30 seconds at least. This could possibly be switched out, but the key thing is the overpower damage here on this one. So yeah, that's pretty much the build. We basically want to generate fury and spend it as fast as possible. I'll show you my stats here. My overpower damage is 2,631.8, just a ton. I think the damage berserking is in here. Damage while berserking is 243. Couple other things you can do. You can swap out your main two-hander with this if you want to focus more on charge rather than Hota damage. Sometimes I'll swap these out just depending on if I'm running Nightmare Dungeons versus boss killing. This guy Soulbrand, I use this. I just kind of want to mention this. I don't really use this for the build, but I used it before I really maximized my gear, and this was to kill Uber Lilith. It basically changes your healing potion to, it doesn't heal you anymore, but it grants you barrier. So if you're having a hard time with the soul spears fighting Lilith, they just because they one-shot you, this will give you kind of an edge to keep you alive. You can take a hit or two, and every time you hit a potion or drink a potion, it'll give you another barrier. So all right, so we're gonna run Uber Lilith real quick, and I'll show you kind of what I do. So charge is gonna give us fury. So I kind of you kind of have to prep this. And that's another thing that a lot of these build guides they don't explain. Like they just say, oh, check out this build, it does a bajillion damage to Lilith, but they don't explain exactly the mechanics or why it works, how it works. So I'll kind of explain it here. I use charge to gain fury, and then I'm going to spend my fury with the Hota, and basically you can hold shift and spend it. And every time I hit, this is going to increase the counter of our Banished Lord's Talisman. Because remember, after we spend 30 primary resource, then the next one is going to overpower. So we're at 210, 280. So one more, and then it'll be locked and loaded, ready to go. And we don't necessarily have to do this, but we just want to make sure we have overpower. This is the 12-second overpower, so if we have that, it's going to work as well. So let's go like that. So we're locked and loaded with the overpower. And I'm going to run up here and kill her. So basically what we're going to do, she's going to spawn. I'm going to kick her and dump all of my resource. Well, first we're gonna do charge to get our resource. But we're going to kick her, dump all of our resource, and then we're going to hit Wrath of the Berserker, War Cry, and Rallying Cry. Pretty much all at once, just to activate all the added bonuses. And that's going to regenerate our resource back to full. and then we're just gonna smash her, and it's going to trigger the critical strike on this. It's going to trigger the overpower on this, and so yeah. All right, let's go. Boom. 65 million damage. Just like that. And you can kind of prep it again while you're waiting here. We're at 280. I'm just gonna kick her, hit my... Oh, didn't work that time. Oh, there we go. Just a little late. But yeah, basically I just kicked her, triggered my Fury generation, and then bonked her. Yeah, super easy. Burial's the same, pretty much. But you just gotta make sure you're locked and loaded. And then this just runs Nightmare Dungeons super easily. I need a little bit more survivability. I'd like to have more resistances. And possibly more life or armor. I'm not really sure. So I can run probably a Nightmare 95. I could probably run 100, but I'm pretty squishy at that level. So I definitely need more survivability. But yeah, it works. Gets the job done. That's for sure.